Me with my BF mom. Asked her to teach some recipes and shit hit the fan. Hey all. I'm at a bit of a loss right now. My boyfriend, Dan, and I have been together for a little over 2 years. No relationship is perfect, but ours is basically as good as it can be. Little conflict, maximum happiness, everything is wonderful, yada yada yada. My family adores him, his dad seems to like me just fine, but for some reason his mom, Carol, has never been too fond of me. I don't push too hard, I'm really respectful whenever I'm around her. I bring her gifts for birthdays and holidays. She's never given me one, not that I care. It's just kind of strange since I've been around for a while, always try and help when I can, etc. And yet, she's always been fairly cold to me. Not outright rude and terrible, just cold. I kind of wrote it off, figuring she's just a tough nut to crack. Anyway, my boyfriend and I recently finished our master's degrees and were feeling bored with our jobs and figured, what the hell, let's move to a different country. When we told the families, everyone was ecstatic for us except Dan's mom, which wasn't really surprising. We both have jobs lined up, so it's not like we'll be bumming around or anything, not that there's anything wrong with traveling, I'm a huge advocate, so the only reason she's not on board with it is because Dan won't be living 25 miles away from her anymore, even though it's a great opportunity for both of us and something he's been wanting to do for a while. We leave in a few weeks, so we've been trying to spend time with him as much as we can. Dan knows about how his mom treats me, and even though she's not rude to me, he's said that he's talked to her about whether or not she likes me, to which she'll reply, she's fine, I'm perfectly nice to her. So like I said, she's not terrible, she's just not great to the point where I never asked Dan to bash her anything. It just makes me sad because I want to be close with his family because they mean a lot to me. So I've been making some efforts to hang out with her. Anyway, we were over at his mom's house for dinner this weekend and I offered to help her in the kitchen, to which she reluctantly obliged. Now, she's a decent cook, but in no way is she an amazing chef or anything. Never mentioned secret recipes or anything like that. But I thought it would be a nice gesture to ask her to teach me some of her recipes. So while I was chopping onions, I said, "Hey Carol, I was wondering if you would teach me some of your recipes? Dan loves your cooking and I would love to cook for him when we're abroad to remind him of home since I know he'll miss your cooking." Then she stopped and walked out of the room. It was super awkward, so I waited around a bit. When she finally came back in, she started yelling at me about how out of line I was. She was saying stuff like, "How dare you? You think you can replace me?" And all this crazy stuff. I was completely shocked and dumbfounded. I immediately walked out and told Dan, who was heading into the kitchen to see what the commotion was about, that I would be leaving. He told me to wait in the car because he was really confused. I sat there for 3 minutes when he came out apologizing, saying his mom was completely in the wrong, so we left. So here I am, a few days later, confused as hell. I'm happy Dan stuck up for me, but this situation is so ridiculous I have no idea where to go from here. He's currently not speaking to his mom, but has received texts from his dad apologizing and chalking his mom's freak out due to the stress of Dan leaving soon. I don't want to be the reason he severs his relationship or anything, but I also feel pretty disrespected over something so silly. Any advice on how to handle this? TLDR, asked my boyfriend's mom to teach me some of her recipes before we move. She freaked out on me. What do I do? Update November 19th, 2015. Hello again. It's me, the monster in the kitchen. By the way, my username referred to me. I don't think she's a monster. I just felt like it was funny referring to myself as the monster. Probably should have clarified that. Thank you so much for all your responses. I logged out and came back to an inbox swarming with support, advice, clarification, etc. I really appreciate the time you all took to respond to my issue. Means a lot, internet strangers, love. Anyway, I'm happy to say that this is a positive update. I definitely sympathize with her because I know it must be scary to have your only child. Yes, Dan is an only child, as a lot of you guessed. How astute of you, Reddit. Pulled away by another woman, even though we have completely different relationships. But regardless, it doesn't excuse what she did, so I let Dan initially reach out to her, to which I followed up later. Dan gave her a call and was very nice, yet firm with her and how she treated me. Carol responded saying that she was really embarrassed and sorry and that she felt terrible and wanted to give each of us some time to cool off before reaching out. I initially told Dan that I wanted to send her an email based off of what you/Vanitypridalist drafted, so he told her that I would reach out when I was ready because I really wanted to frame the conversation rather than have her feel like complete crap for her outburst. So I sent her a text later in the evening and we met for breakfast this morning. She was so apologetic and cried, and I said that although it did hurt me, that I understand where she's coming from and am in no way trying to replace her. I respect her a lot because she raised my literal dream man, so even though we may not be best friends, she's done a lot of things right. We hung out for a bit, ended things wonderfully with a redo invitation to cook dinner together this weekend, her recipes, and hugged goodbye. All is right in the world. Thanks again for offering insight and perspective. Y'all are the best. P.S. Dan is the best. Can't wait to lock that shit down. Any Redditors in Australia, see you soon. TLDR talked with Carol, everything's good, we're all happy. TLDR, mandatory summary/question. My former coworkers hired me to work for them, but it was a bait and switch, they fired me, and I'm ashamed. I was recently fired from my job. I never thought I would find myself in this position, and while mentally I am struggling to get past the emotional aspect of it, I know I have to push through and focus on finding another job. My situation was a bit uncommon. A few months ago, two former coworkers, Amy and Brooke, reached out to me. I had a great relationship with them and saw them as mentors. The job we worked together at was in, let's say, custom teapot painting. I'm disguising the real field for anonymity's sake. I found that it wasn't my strong suit and it was a very toxic company, so I went to a company where I did teapot painting in-house. I was great at this new job and consistently got great performance reviews in 2 years there. Amy and Brooke started their own custom teapot company and they wanted me as their first hire. I turned down the job 3 separate times, knowing this type of work catered to a lot of my weaknesses. Throughout every conversation, they were so complimentary to me, saying they knew how smart and capable I was and they hated that my old toxic company made me doubt myself. Finally, they told me that my role would not include managing the custom orders, but would just be painting the teapots. On one hand, I was great at my current job, but felt like I wasn't being challenged. I really looked up to these two women, trusted them a lot, and thought working with them would give me the opportunity to grow and develop more in my field. So, I decided to take it. Before I officially accepted their offer, I tried negotiating the proposed salary for just a few $1,000s more. Here's the first red flag. They said for that level of salary, they would want me to take on some of the responsibilities of being the point of contact for some of these custom orders, just for 1 to 2 projects. I thought it was a strange practice for that small of an increase, but again, they were so complimentary and said they knew I could do it, and I leaned on the trust one had in them, so I ultimately accepted. Since I hadn't done that type of role for over 2 years, my employment contract stated that I would take on that role 6 months after starting, and the raise would come when I took those responsibilities on. Fast forward. About 2 weeks into the job, Amy said I was doing such a great job that I would be moved up to the PM role, with the salary boost, now instead of waiting 6 months. A few weeks later, they asked if I wanted to take on more, basically back to what my role was at the old toxic company, for an even bigger pay boost. I remember thinking that it felt like a bait and switch, but they made me feel like I really could do this. I thought maybe my imposter syndrome was worse than I thought and they saw something in me I couldn't see myself. They said they would always be there to support me if I had issues, so I felt comfortable enough and accepted. About a month into the role, things had changed even more. We nearly doubled in size, and everyone else in my role had significantly more experience than me. As we grew, I got the feeling they wanted to take a more hands-off approach. I was the only PM who didn't have a painting partner, so I felt like I didn't have anyone to even bounce ideas off of without being a major inconvenience. One of my projects was for something I had never done before, and I was really in over my head. I was working until 8 p.m. or later and sobbing over dinner every night at the thought everything on my plate. I ended up making a few incorrect assumptions on that project. The customer never found out, but it did slightly mess up the budget for the project. Here's the thing, while I took responsibility and apologized, I feel like with the information I had, they weren't the craziest assumptions to come to. Maybe I should have defended my decision-making style more so they could have seen where I was coming from, but I didn't want to seem like I was making excuses, so I just apologized and fixed what I could. During all of this, I also was having difficulties on a project where it was the company's third time trying to design for a client who couldn't stop changing their minds. Amy tried, Brooke tried, and now me. It was bad timing, but that project began to fly off the rails right as this issue came up. Initially, they seemed annoyed, but late that week they told me, "We all mess up sometimes, we still mess up to this day all the time, and we knew exactly what we were getting when we hired you, and this is the company you'll retire from." The following week, they fired me. It was a 10-minute conversation, and when I asked why I couldn't be put on a PIP or have a warning, Amy said, "This is really uncomfortable for me, so let's keep this short." They offered me an exit interview, but not with them, with a new admin they had just hired. Right after the conversation, they locked my work computer, and that was that. Since then, I've tried so hard to take my ego out of this situation and look at it different ways. Mentally, I was really struggling. I live alone and had been in complete solitude for months due to COVID, and it had started to weigh on me. An old eating disorder resurfaced due to the anxiety I was under at this job. I felt like I didn't have the option to go into treatment because I couldn't miss work. Ultimately, I know this role just wasn't a fit for me. But I really tried as hard as I could. I wanted to be the great employee I thought they saw me as. Given the history I had with them, I feel like there's an added layer to this firing that isn't there with most, and it's been hard to get over. I feel like a lot of this was imposter syndrome coming true. My confidence in myself professionally has plummeted. I feel scared to apply for jobs if I don't surpass every single qualification. I'm now in weekly therapy for my eating disorder as well as this situation, and it has helped. My question for you is how to handle this during my job search. I was only there 5 months. Should I leave this off my resume completely? Or will that raise more red flags? They did agree, in writing, to give a neutral reference. What does that mean for the employer side? I know I have to figure out how to explain this in interviews in a matter-of-fact way, and I was hoping you could provide a script on how to do that. Right now, I just feel like a total loser. I've still been keeping it a secret from a lot of my friends and family because I'm so ashamed. Per Allison's request, her response is not included but can be found on the original letter. Update. I wanted to thank you and the AAM community for your kind words. I wrote to you in a place where I really did feel so down, and to get so much support from strangers who don't need to be in my corner really made all the difference to me. I actually kickstarted my job search the same week the letter was published, and am happy to share I'm in a new role I love that is a 30% increase in pay for a fraction of the stress. Now, a couple of crazy updates. 1. Amy and Brooke fired almost everyone else on the team there shortly after I wrote in. My first thought was that they were in financial troubles, but I heard through the grapevine they replaced all the roles, and then some of those new people ended up getting let go as well. So, they've essentially fired every single person they ever hired to do the role I did. I guess the slew of let go employees turned to Glassdoor to share their experiences, all nearly identical to mine. I guess I was just the first of many. I still haven't written one, but I guess I didn't need to. Then, Amy and Brooke go on to write an absolutely unhinged blog post talking about how they love the negative Glassdoor reviews and going line by line through the reviews talking about how everyone that got let go was simply mediocre, ignoring all the valid criticisms and devastating experiences each reviewer had. It was truly a sight to see. It got sent to me almost a dozen times on LinkedIn from mutual connections. So, overall, the whole experience was a great lesson. I'll never let another person allow me to go against my own better judgment or blindly believe colleagues/bosses have my best interest at heart. Hindsight is always 20/20, and wow, I'm so happy I'm done with that place. Thank you again, Allison. I can't even begin to tell you how much your advice helped me come back from a really low place.